Hello and welcome back, and I'm sorry if you can't really hear my voice too much right now. I've been speaking non-stop to different brands for the better part of 5 days here in Shenzhen, China, and I'll be honest, I've nearly lost my voice already, so I apologize if I'm not really coming through as loud as I normally are. But today I want to talk about a very popular NAS that we talked about a few months ago, the Minisforum N5 Pro. And this video is a big update on everything that's now confirmed about that device, but there's also new information about some new NAS devices coming from Minisforum and future kind of improvements and changes that are happening to that series. The TLDR, straight away, number one, 80% of the specifications that we talked about of the Minisforum N5 Pro that we saw at CES 2025 have remained the same. There's some small tweaks and pretty much all of them are positive. But the second big part of this is going to be that it's not actually the only NAS. They're going to be running a non-Pro version as well. It's going to be more affordable and the specifications have been scaled down, but in one weird way they've been scaled up. Something I'll talk about later on. But before we go any further, quick disclaimer straight off the bat. I'm here in Shenzhen, China, not because I'm being paid by Minisforum. I've paid for it myself. Well, I say myself and Eddie decided to send me to the other side of the world here in China and contact as many brands as we could to visit their facilities. We've got a series of videos on that, Minisforum as well. We did a whole tour of their entire operations there, right the way down to the factory level. We're going to do a whole dedicated video on that. But this video is specifically about that NAS solution. I even saw the N5 Pro going through production, through their production facility. Hopefully there's some of that there on screen. But first up, let's go straight into that N5 Pro there. So the N5 Pro, these are now the confirmed specifications. Number one, it is still going to be utilizing that AMD AI processor, the Ryzen 9 HX370 CPU that pretty much confirmed, and it's the same CPU that's inside that new AI X1 Pro mini PC that we talked about on the channel a few weeks ago. On top of that, the system is also definitely going to be arriving with support of ECC memory, DDR5 5600 megahertz, and they have tested it all the way up to 128 gigabytes of capacity there. Now, in terms of storage, you've got the 5 main SATA ports. They've tested up to 22 TB drives, and on top of that, it also arrives with 3 M.2 NVMe slots there. Those are Gen 4x1, Gen 4x1, and Gen 4x2. But an interesting update, alongside, by the way, them improving the external chassis, and they showed me the first generation and the second generation prototype just to show me the difference between the constructed enclosure for heat dissipation there, and that was that they are trying to wonder about including an optional 64 gig OS module inside. So rather than you missing out and losing one of your M2 NVMe slots, they're tempted to utilize, I believe I might be getting this wrong because there were lots of discussions, utilizing the M2 key port there to install a 64 gig OS module. It's a proprietary thing they want to put in, and ultimately what that means is that whatever NAS software you're going to use, and we'll talk about that more later on, you won't have to lose one of those M2 NVMe slots in order to do it. But they are wondering about whether that's going to be an optional extra. It looks like it will be an option, something you can add on at cart. But really, it's the expandability in the ports and connections that I was really surprised by, because most of them that they talked about during CES, and I think I said this during the video, I had my doubts simply because there was just so much in terms of connectivity, and they are confirming that this is what it's going to roll out with. So notwithstanding that there is going to be a PCIe Gen 4x4 upgrade slot, so not huge, but when you think about the range of connections coming, there's going to be a 10 gigabit Ethernet port and a 5 gigabit Ethernet port there, so no 2.5 or 1 gig here. On top of that, it's going to have a USB 4 Type-C connection, so Thunderbolt 4. It's going to have one on the front and one on the back there. But moreover, they've even included an OCuLink port as well. So that means you have got OCuLink expandability, you have got USB 4 expandability, you have got PCIe expandability all in that box, and it's already got 3 M.2 slots anyway. So that, alongside the 64 gig storage module, does give you a huge scope for scale out towards your own requirements. Which brings me neatly onto the second part of today's video, which is the non-Pro version. They alluded to this at CES, and that was that alongside the Pro version, they want to produce the same general architecture, but lower down some of the hardware specs, bring down that price point. And I will say straight away, there was no confirmation of the price point. The slides that they showed me indicated Q1, Q2, and I'm recording this on the 26th of March 2025. We're right on the end of Q1, so Q2 at the earliest. So alongside, as mentioned earlier on, the same architecture, it's worth highlighting the CPU is where the big difference is here. And the non-Pro version is still at the kind of prototype and evaluation stage. So that's why they've not been as loud about it. And that's what one of the main reasons for that is deciding on the CPU. So they've got two CPU choices right now that they're either going to choose one or the other, or they're going to run both at the same time. And that is either going to be the AMD Ryzen 5 Pro, that's the 8645HS, or the AMD Ryzen 7640HS. One of those CPUs we've obviously discussed in other mini PCs on the channel. But ultimately, these, and this is what I was referring to earlier on when I talk about scale up, scale down, these are more affordable CPUs, but at the same time, they actually have more lanes to play with there. And I think that's going to allow them to readdress the balance between the Pro and the non-Pro. But straight away, it's worth highlighting, there are of course going to be limitations when you scale down the CPU's capabilities. Number one, there is no support of ECC memory on this one. It's running DDR5, so there's going to be those of you that are going to highlight on die ECC is a thing, but it's still got the 2 slots, it's still been tested up to 128 gig, it just doesn't support ECC. Alongside that, there is still the 5 SATA bays and the 3 M.2 NVMe bays, and the PCIe distributions to those M.2s, although they gave me slides, because they're not nailing down which CPU, I know they're going to be Gen 4, but what those speeds will be, they weren't prepared to completely commit to, so I'm not going to say in this video. Interestingly, it's still going to have OCuLink. It's still going to have USB 4, it's still going to have that PCIe upgrade slot there, all great stuff, and it's still going to have that option of the 64 gig storage module if you want it. But the only other notable downside I could see about the non-Pro is that it won't have 10 gigabit Ethernet. It will have 5 gigabit Ethernet there, but again, because they're still in the evaluation process, it's whether it's going to be, if they can allow for 2 times 5 gigabit Ethernet or 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and a second 5 gigabit Ethernet port there. And that's what they're trying to evaluate between the CPUs. That's why the non-Pro version, I will be surprised if it rolls out at the same time as the Pro. And also, knowing you guys and the way you commented on the previous video about this device, realistically, I think 7, 8 out of 10 users would have bought the Pro anyway. So I can understand why they're reluctant to commit too much resources to the non-Pro so early doors. And that brings us to the final leg of this video, and that is to do with the software, because this is a really interesting point, and this wasn't something they discussed at CES, and that is they are looking into supplying an operating system alongside it. Now, they found an operating system running on Debian that they want to work with, and again, it is a very, I would argue, common one. The slides they showed me look not dissimilar to a few other OSs I've seen, like the Arico one that's launching on Kickstarter soon. The same software, it's the same software base. It's not strictly open source, it's being built upon by different users, and they're exploring the possibility of using it because it can run ZFS there. It's got immutable lockable snapshots. It's got all of the RAID functionality there, all the way through from your traditional RAIDs to your RAID Z. It's got the App Center there, it's got Docker virtualization and standard virtual machine use, not so much there, and a great mobile app. But ultimately what I mean is that they're looking into it, but they don't know if that's what users want. Like, they have their Minisforum mini PCs, the MS01, a very popular device, that arrives if you get an SSD with it with a Windows license. But they themselves, you know, highlight, no one buys a Minisforum PC for the Windows license. People buy it for the hardware, the design, and its capabilities. So, much like a Windows license, they're exploring whether if they include that option, one, they will obviously have to provide support, which will then affect the price and it will be increased. And if most users were never going to use it anyway and slam UnRAID or TrueNAS on it, it makes sense why they're slightly hesitant to include the software if it is going to be provided to everyone and if only 1 in every 10 users tries to use it. By the way, these are all my observations during the meeting that I had with them. There'll be more on that on the next video. But I see the logic, and it's either going to go one of 3 ways. Number one, they're going to include it on that 64 gig module for anyone that buys it with the 64 gig option. Number 2, they're going to allow it as a download on their website there, whether that will be serial number locked, I assume it would be. but then you've still got to factor in support, or they're not going to include it at all as an option at checkout. But more importantly, I asked them flat out, if they're going to go down this software route, what does that mean for users that want to use TrueNAS, UnRAID, Open Media Vault, etc., etc.? They've made it abundantly clear that's not going to affect your warranty, it's not going to affect anything, it's not going to affect your support. If you want to use third-party operating systems, they're down to clown, and that's great. But that's really it. It's my final day here in Shenzhen, China. So by the time you're watching this, I've already left. I've still got the video that I'm going to be making when I was exploring their own facilities there, and I've covered a few other brands and their production line facilities and factories and videos coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. But me and this notebook, I've got quite a lot of stories to tell, and I look forward to sharing them there. But if you want to learn more, in the comments there'll be a link to an updated article on this device, and again, it's the usual YouTube thing, like, subscribe, do what you want, but ultimately if you want to learn more about this, stay tuned to the channel. And apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.